The rumors about Mount Hakami were endless, a sacred place where the boundaries between the living and the dead blurred. The locals whispered about the spirits of the forest, but the one that sent shivers through everyone's spine was the tale of a creature from the west, a Wendigo, drawn by the desperate, hungry souls who sought refuge on the mountain. It was said to come for those with a dark hunger, devouring them piece by piece. I never believed it, not until I went there myself. I arrived on the mountain alone, armed with nothing but my camera. I was there for a documentary, something to shed light on the folklore. The climb was steep, and as I ventured deeper into the thick trees, the fog thickened. It curled around me, damp and suffocating, as if it were alive. The path faded, becoming more treacherous the higher I went. The air smelled different up here, stale, almost metallic. Hours passed before I found it, a small abandoned shrine, its wood rotting, overtaken by moss and vines. But what caught my attention wasn't the shrine itself. It was the claw marks, deep gashes carved into the stone steps leading to it. They were fresh. I knelt down to examine them, running my fingers through the grooves. A chill ran down my spine as I felt something watching me. The sun was setting fast, and I decided to set up my camp by the shrine, thinking it would provide some protection. As night fell, the forest became deathly silent. No wind rustled the leaves, no animals scurried through the underbrush. I could hear only my heartbeat thudding in my chest. And then came the sound, a faint, distant cry. At first, I thought it was the wind, but no, it was too deliberate, too human. The cry grew louder, closer, and I realized it wasn't just one voice. There were several, all moaning in unison, pleading for help. My breath caught in my throat as I strained my ears to hear. And then, the scent hit me. It was foul, like rotting meat mixed with something burnt. I grabbed my flashlight and pointed it toward the trees. The beam of light sliced through the mist, illuminating something pale and gaunt just at the edge of the forest. It moved, stepping closer. A figure, unnaturally tall, with elongated limbs and glowing eyes that pierced the darkness. The beam of light sliced through the mist, illuminating something pale and gaunt at the edge of the forest. It moved, stepping closer. A figure, unnaturally tall, with elongated limbs and glowing eyes that pierced the darkness. The Wendigo. I scrambled back, my heart racing, stumbling over the uneven ground as it came into full view. Its skin was stretched thin over its bones, its mouth wide, filled with jagged teeth, and its eyes, empty, yet filled with a hunger that could never be satiated. I ran, sprinted through the woods, branches tearing at my clothes and skin. The cries grew louder, more desperate. I could hear them all around me, echoing off the trees, as if the souls of the mountain were begging me to join them. But worse than the cries were the footsteps behind me, heavy, deliberate, growing closer with every second. I didn't know where I was going. The fog was thick, disorienting. My lungs burned, and my legs ached, but I couldn't stop. I knew if I did, it would have me. I could feel its breath on the back of my neck, cold and rancid. Just as I was about to collapse, I stumbled onto a clearing. There, in the center, was a towering tree with a rope hanging from one of its branches. A noose. The whispers around me intensified, urging me toward it. My legs moved on their own, my mind clouded with fear. I knew what I had to do. The only way to escape the Wendigo was to offer myself to the mountain. As I placed the noose around my neck, I heard its guttural growl behind me. The last thing I saw were its glowing eyes, filled with hunger. It was a school trip meant to test our endurance. We were taken to the deep forest in northern Japan, far away from the city lights and comforts of home. A group of 20 students, each one excited for the adventure, unaware of the terror lurking in the dense woods. But I remember how the guide, an old man with a scarred face, warned us. Don't stray from the path. This forest is ancient, and it is hungry. At first, we laughed it off. What could possibly be dangerous in a modern world like ours? But as we ventured deeper, The forest seemed to close in on us. The trees grew denser, their branches hanging low, and the sky turned dark, even though it was midday. I felt it before I saw anything. A chill in the air that seemed unnatural, as though something was watching us, something that didn't belong in the world of the living. The rest of the group marched ahead, oblivious, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. My eyes scanned the trees, but there was nothing, just shadows, endless shadows. That night, we set up camp by a stream. The sound of the water rushing over rocks was meant to be soothing, but it only amplified the eerie silence of the forest. As we huddled around the fire, telling ghost stories to pass the time, one of the students, Tato, mentioned a legend he'd heard from his grandmother. She spoke of a creature, a cannibal spirit that wandered these woods, a Wendigo. He laughed it off, but the firelight caught the nervous glances of the others. None of us knew the Wendigo wasn't just a Western legend. Tato's grandmother had seen it, or so she claimed, during a famine in her village. As the night wore on, I found it impossible to sleep. Every rustle of the leaves set my heart racing. It wasn't just my imagination. Something was out there. I could feel it. Then, around midnight, I heard it. The unmistakable crunch of leaves underfoot. Someone was walking through the forest. I sat up, scanning the campsite. Everyone was asleep, or at least pretending to be. Suddenly, there was a scream, a blood-curdling, desperate scream that echoed through the trees. We all bolted upright, grabbing flashlights and calling out. It was Tato. He was gone. Panic set in as we fanned out to search. The forest swallowed our voices, the beams from our flashlights barely cutting through the thick fog that had rolled in. I stumbled ahead of the group, my heart hammering in my chest. And then I saw it. Something pale, hunched over in the distance, dragging a limp body through the trees. I froze. The creature turned, its eyes glowing like embers in the dark. Its face, if you could call it that, was a grotesque mask of stretched skin and gaping teeth. It was gnawing on Tato's arm, ripping the flesh with a sickening ease. I stumbled backward, trying to scream, but no sound came out. The creature stood, towering over me, its breath visible in the cold air. I could see now. It wasn't human. It was the Wendigo, its form twisted by hunger, its eyes filled with nothing but an insatiable need to feed. I ran, leaving the others behind, terror driving me every step. The forest felt like it was closing in, branches tearing at my clothes, as if the woods wanted to trap me. But it didn't stop, not until I burst into a clearing, gasping for air. I turned, expecting to see the Wendigo right behind me, but there was nothing. Just silence. The forest had swallowed it, and Tato. By morning, half the group was missing. We never found their bodies. Only bones picked clean, scattered among the trees. I've chased the legend for years, the Wendigo, a creature of hunger and malice, feared in North America. It wasn't supposed to exist in Japan. Yet, here I am, in the remote forest of Hokkaido. I'm convinced I'm close. I've spent my life piecing together fragments of folklore, whispers from isolated villagers, rumors that this ancient hunger followed me across the ocean. It all started when I came across a journal left behind a Canadian missionary from the early 1900s. His final entries described strange disappearances in a remote Japanese village, something no one in the area had ever heard of. He detailed the eerie accounts, missing hunters, gnawed bones, frantic sightings of something grotesque. It was the same chilling signs linked to the Wendigo. His last words? The hunger is spreading. It wears their faces. It is here. The villagers had warned me about going into the mountains during winter, but I didn't listen. I had come too far. They believed something ancient lived up there, something that didn't belong. They didn't use the word Wendigo. They had their own stories of spirits that could take human form, creatures that fed on flesh and despair. Their fear made me feel closer to the truth. And now, after weeks of tracking, I find myself deep in the snow-laden woods, The cold bit at my skin, but I could barely notice it anymore. My breath comes in clouds, but the air feels thicker than it should. It's quiet. Too quiet. The deeper I go, the heavier the silence becomes, as though the forest itself is holding its breath. My heart pounds harder, a steady drumbeat in my chest, a rhythm that feels all wrong. I keep thinking back to the missionary's journal. The hunger wears their faces. It echoes in my mind, but I shake it off. It's just the paranoia creeping in. I've been out here too long, too isolated. The snow is deeper now, making it harder to move forward, but I push through. I know I'm close. A rustle in the trees ahead stops me in my tracks. My pulse quickens. I'm not alone. I slowly raise my flashlight, casting pale light across the thick trunks and snow-dusted branches. For a moment, I see nothing. But then, a figure, crouched low behind a tree, its form barely visible against the darkness. Human-like, but not quite. The head turns slowly, revealing its face. No, it looks like a man, but the eyes, they're hollow, dark pits where light seems to vanish. The mouth stretches too wide, lips pulled back to reveal jagged, yellowing teeth. I take a step back, my legs shaking beneath me. My breath catches in my throat as this thing rises. It's impossibly tall, and its joints creaking like old wood. Its eyes stay locked on me, and it begins to move, slowly, deliberately, as though it's savoring this moment. I turn and run. The cold tears in my lungs as I stumble through the snow, desperate to put distance between me and that thing. Branches whip against my face, but I don't stop. The woods feel endless, the trees closing all in around me. My footsteps are loud, too loud. I keep looking over my shoulder, expecting to see it behind me, but the forest is empty again. It's only silence. I stop, gasping for breath. My heart hammers in my chest, my legs weak. Did I lose it? Or is it still watching me? The feeling of being observed never leaves me. I fumble with my flashlight, casting light frantically across the woods. Nothing. I try to calm myself, swallowing the bile rising in my throat. It's not real, I whisper, though I don't believe it. The light flickers, then dies. I'm plunged into darkness. My breath comes fast and shallow as I try to fix the flashlight. My frozen fingers fumbling, a crack echoes through the trees, the sound of something large stepping closer. Slowly, I turn. There, just beyond the tree line, is the figure again. No more than 20 feet away, watching me with those empty, hollow eyes. I drop the flashlight. It moves toward me, but it doesn't walk. It glides across the snow, impossibly fast, its limbs barely moving, but it gets closer and closer. I run again, my legs barely responding, the cold seeping into my bones. I can't tell how far I've gone anymore, or if I'm just running in circles. I know that it's behind me. It's always behind me. I hear its breath now, ragged and wet, so close I can feel the heat of it on the back of my neck. Suddenly, the ground beneath me gives way. I tumble into a ravine, snow engulfing me as I fall. Pain shoots through my leg as I hit the bottom, but I don't have time to feel it. I scramble to my feet, my body screaming in protest. I know it's still coming, but when I look up, I see nothing. Only the trees. They're dark and motionless. I wait, every muscle tense, listening, waiting for the sound of it closing in, but there's still only silence. Then, a voice, soft, almost human. Why do you run? I freeze. It's right behind me. Slowly, I turn. The thing is standing there, its face inches from mine. Its eyes, dark and empty, stare into mine, and I feel my sanity slipping away. The smell of rot fills my nose. The hunger, it wears their faces. It reaches out, its hand closing around my throat, and I realize the truth too late. I was never hunting the Wendigo. It was hunting me,